device, Homo sapiens experienced such a genetic bottleneck effect? Would a worldwide population dwindle to as few as 3,000 Homo sapiens around the world?
Same patterns of history just keep repeating themselves over and over again. And behind that pattern, we continue to see possibly an alien influence causing some of these events to happen. Flood stories are really very interesting. What they all say is that this extraterrestrial race, the angels, the gods, whatever we want to call them today, they basically just got tired of humanity. They became noisy, rebellious, and it was just time to wipe them out.
It's very possible that the aliens decided that in order to cleanse the planet, they needed to do things of huge magnitude, like the flood that the Bible talks about as Noah. God came down to him and said he was going to punish mankind. And Noah, you are good, and I want you to build this massive ark and collect all these animals, a male and female, and you put them in this boat, and you float away. And you start all over again.
When we come in the Bible and we see Noah, we find that he somehow knows the future, whereas nobody else on earth seems to know this. But specifically, he has been given blueprints, somehow a device whereby he can survive this catastrophe. Now that is something very specific, which singles Noah out as being a person who might have had exposure to ancient aliens.
Maybe the extraterrestrials created some type of catastrophe, but it's also possible that the flood itself was a natural disaster. An flood. Extraterrestrials ensured our continued survival. Could there be a reason why humans have survived such disasters time and time again? And is it really possible that the Great Flood and other cataclysmic extinction events were caused by extraterrestrials? If so, who are these destructive beings? And what is their ultimate purpose? Indonesia, 2004. A massive underwater earthquake produces a tsunami that kills over 230,000 people in 14 coastal countries. It was one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. Geologists determined that the violent movement of tectonic plates on the floor of the Indian Ocean created lethal tidal waves, measuring a height of nearly 100 feet.
Tsunamis are basically super tidal waves. And it really comes down to, at the simplest level, how much energy is put into the ocean at the point that generates the tidal wave. And the water gets displaced, and it actually forms a wave that can be very coherent and travel for large distances, and will eventually hit the shore somewhere.
But just days before the disaster, several eyewitnesses reported seeing strange, unidentified flying objects to the India Daily newspaper.
People were reporting seeing bright lights in the sky prior to and during that tsunami. Scientists think that that's just maybe the tectonic plates are rubbing each other, and there's so much friction that they're giving off a glow.
Known as earthquake lights. Mainstream scientists have been studying these phenomena since they were first photographed in Japan in the 1960s. But although there are many theories As to their cause, there has been, as yet, no viable explanation.
What is becoming very apparent is that UFO activity and tectonic activity go hand in hand. Now, there are an awful lot of questions to be asked here, and science needs to answer an awful lot of them. The central question is this: is this UFO phenomenon just a byproduct of the tectonic activity?
Iceland, April 2010. One of the country's largest volcanoes erupts for the first time in nearly 2 centuries. In the aftermath of the blast, Sky News captured footage of an unusual V-shaped flying object amongst the plume of smoke and ash.
An awful lot of video material was taken of this volcanic eruption, and some of it clearly shows an anomalous object hovering roughly around the volcano. This object is clearly under intelligent control, and from what we see on the video, it's also apparent that this isn't birds, as some skeptics have been trying to argue.
According to scientists, volcanic eruptions are natural events that occur when rocks deep within the earth become so hot they melt and form magma.
Basically, you build up a lot of pressure in the magma in the location where the volcano is, and it has a point where it can release, and then that magma and the hot gases and the hot lava all kind of erupt out through the top.
Still, some researchers believe there is a high correlation between catastrophic events and the appearance of UFOs.
The fact that we have UFOs before and sometimes during these events, whether tsunami or earthquakes, clearly shows that something is present. Now the question is, are they just monitoring it, or are they actually somehow involved with it? Are they causing it?
Is there a way that you can trigger a volcano? For example, let's say it's sort of on the verge anyway. Is there something you can do technologically to either trigger it or to make it worse? We don't know. We just see this apparent foreknowledge of an event like that happening. The UFO shows up, the event happens.
According to ancient astronaut theorists, alien spacecraft have been spotted at or near the sites of so-called natural catastrophes since ancient times. But why? Is it possible extraterrestrials are merely curious about geologic events on Earth? Or could there be another, perhaps more sinister motive for their interest? April 14th, 1561. Nuremberg, Germany. Citizens awoke at dawn to the spectacle of cylindrical objects appearing in the sky, from which red, black, orange, and blue discs emerged. According to eyewitness accounts reported in the Nuremberg Gazette, tubes resembling cannon barrels also appeared, and the objects began to fight one another. After about an hour of battle, the entities seemed to catch fire and fell to earth, where they turned to steam. 5 years later, Austrian architect Hans Glaser created a woodcut during the famous event.
In that and in the eyewitness reports, we actually see UFOs in battle. They were reported actually fighting each other, shooting each other down. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the woodcut, you'll actually see a couple of circles in the ground giving off smoke. They've obviously crashed. They've been shot down. That is very interesting because it shows that the pattern of aggression amongst the UFOs has been going on for a long time.
To some ancient astronaut theorists, the 540-year-old woodcut is evidence of an alien cosmic war. And, in fact, they claim similar hostile events have occurred in human history for millennia.
The evidence from the record from eyewitness testimony shows a connection between the UFO and the thinning effort, where there's apparently a wanton intention to wipe out or thin out the human race. For example, during the plague years, there were a lot of UFO reports about bright lights in the sky that were spreading gas, and people were reporting that these gases were actually the cause of the plague.
But could there really be a connection between eyewitness accounts of alien space wars and the recent sightings of UFOs during Earth's so-called natural catastrophes? And is there any proof that alien visitors are involved in creating cataclysmic events in a sinister effort to control or thin out Earth's population? Perhaps the answer can be found in Florence, Italy, among the diaries and secret papers of one of the world's most brilliant and mysterious men, Leonardo da Vinci. (2005), Florence, Italy. Beyond a hidden staircase in the Santissima Annunziata convent, researchers from Italy's Military Geographical Institute discovered the secret workshop of Leonardo da Vinci.
He was the true archetypal Renaissance man. Brilliant painter, brilliant inventor, brilliant poet, ambidextrous, could write with his left hand and his right hand at the same time, wrote backwards instead of forwards. Very interesting guy.
Though da Vinci is renowned for his public paintings like the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper, ancient astronaut theorists are more intrigued by his private notebooks that contain sketches of futuristic military technology, including machine guns, tanks, helicopters, and even submarines.
Clearly seems that Leonardo da Vinci was privy to a series of secrets that had been handed down for many, many thousands of years. Da Vinci may also have actually been contacted by human-like extraterrestrials who either spoke to him in person or perhaps telepathically and inspired him to do so many different things.
We do know, for example, that one of his inventions was a circular car. It's kind of like a UFO. Now, he's also into inventing weapons. And did that come from the fact that the UFO has demonstrated basically some aggressiveness? And did some of that maybe in some way rub off on him?
Were they trying to give him weapons that could be used to destroy life on Earth? That could have been possible.
But if Leonardo da Vinci did have knowledge of advanced weaponry, might he have learned of it through observation and study? Or was this knowledge given to him by another, perhaps extraterrestrial source? There is this book of prophecies, which is a very rare book, and in there are some type of descriptions that could indicate some type of an extraterrestrial visitation. There are references in which Da Vinci himself says that he's had these encounters, these visions of God and angels. And of course, according to the ancient NASA hypothesis, that wasn't God, it wasn't angels, they were extraterrestrials. Is it possible that over the centuries, extraterrestrials have been partnering with human collaborators? Human beings entrusted with a kind of advanced scientific knowledge that would allow mankind to leap over centuries of normal intellectual evolution. To ancient astronaut theorists, the fact that mankind had gone from a horse and buggy to the moon in less than 100 years makes such a notion not only possible, but entirely probable. In our development, all of a sudden, we've made a quantum leap where we were sitting in caves munching on bananas, and the next thing we do is we're building pyramids. Virtually overnight. And so that quantum leap can be explained with a direct extraterrestrial intervention of our past.
And the visitors are the ones who are revered as gods, who seem to come on flying shields or silver boats or any of the various descriptions of extraterrestrial technology that you see in these ancient legends. And they consistently are trying to cultivate humanity in a direction that's beneficial for everyone.
There are many who believe extraterrestrial visitors might have provided intellectual inspiration to men like Albert Einstein, whose theories of relativity opened the door for the possibility of future travels through space and time. J. Robert Oppenheimer, whose research in the field of theoretical physics resulted in the development of atomic weapons. Wernher von Braun, whose innovations in advanced rocket technology led to the modern-day space program.
When we look into the lives and the motivations as to Wernher von Braun and to why he wanted to take mankind into outer space, we're confronted with the fact that he was absolutely convinced that we had gone there before, or that an ancient civilization had come from there to us. These people were motivated, and specifically, they wanted to take us to space because they were convinced that somehow they would find something which would completely change planet Earth.
Then there is Nikola Tesla, whose experiments with electricity led to everything from satellite technology and robotics to what some would term a death ray.
But the Tesla death ray, Tesla said, could annihilate an army of 100,000 soldiers at once. It could melt an aircraft engine from 250 miles away. When the FBI investigated Tesla's murder, they found documentation that the Tesla death ray was in development at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1943. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 1943. Where was the Roswell flying saucer taken? Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So we have a connection to that weapon.
Is it possible that Nikola Tesla's scientific achievements could have been influenced by alien intelligence? Might other human geniuses throughout time have served as human gateways, allowing extraterrestrials to jumpstart our technological advances? If the answer is yes, then what are we being prepared for? And might there be a connection between mankind's intellectual and scientific advancements and the so-called natural disasters that threaten to wipe entire populations off the face of the earth? The Omo River, Ethiopia. Flowing south 400 miles into Lake Turkana. The banks of this river are rich in hominid fossil fragments, including those of chimpanzees, gorillas, and early humanoids. Here in 1967, paleoanthropologist Richard Leakey unearthed two partial human skulls. The remains date as far back as 195,000 years ago, making the fossils the oldest evidence of modern humans, or Homo sapiens.
We are constantly still finding new breakthroughs and either more complete skeletons or a more complete site. If we look at the fossil record, at some point eventually you find common ancestors with chimpanzees. You go back really close, you have Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon man, and we came out of Cro-Magnon man, and the Neanderthals die out. And it's really interesting mystery to try and piece together why were we more successful than they were.
We are the only one who came out of the family tree with culture. Why? Evolution says by coincidence. We have adapted as best. I say no. It was an artificial mutation made out of the family tree.
Then overnight, we were building pyramids. Sumeria was created. All those different high achievements were done virtually overnight. So this quantum leap in development, this big bang of knowledge or intelligence, all of a sudden happened. And the ancient astronaut theory suggests that this is a direct result of extraterrestrials tampering with our DNA.
So we're half human and half extraterrestrial. We're hybrids.
We have incredible wealth of information in stone, preserved from ancient times, that can lead us in a direction of really knowing that the ancient ancestors of modern humans were not simply born on Earth, but came here from somewhere else.
But if extraterrestrials arrived here in the distant past, who were they? And why did they come here? Ancient astronaut theorists believe answers exist in early Sumerian texts. In 1849, British archaeologist Austin Henry Layard discovered 22,000 clay tablets in the ancient Sumerian city of Nineveh, in an area now known as Iraq. The tablets contain cuneiform script, believed to be the earliest writing system, created by the Sumerians 6,000 years ago. Author Zecharia Sitchin spent more than 30 years translating the Sumerian clay tablets. In his 1976 book, The 12th Planet, Sitchin claims the cuneiform texts describe an alien race named the Anunnaki, who came to Earth from an undiscovered planet in our solar system, beyond Neptune, called Nibiru.
They explained to the Sumerians that through their own rise to a technological culture, they damaged their atmosphere. And they came here seeking gold and precious elements to repair their planet's dwindling atmosphere.
According to Sitchin, the Anunnaki first visited Earth 450,000 years ago, during the age of Neanderthals. And they created Homo sapiens through genetic engineering to create a species to work and mine precious minerals for them.
Our forefathers believed that they were gods. And they were here on purpose. They wanted to make our primitive generation at that time intelligent. They wanted to plant curiosity into our brain. And we became more developed in technology, in astronomy, in every field. That's what they wanted. The question is, why?
When you look at the ancient creation stories, you find that what they said about our position as Homo sapiens is that we were created to be a slave race or a work race.
According to Sitchin's interpretation of the ancient tablets, the human civilization in Sumer was set up under the guidance of the Anunnaki. And to disguise alien manipulation, human kings were inaugurated to provide intermediaries between mankind and the so-called gods. Then, around 3000 BC, humans began building stone monuments, such as Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids. For mainstream historians, the physical ability and know-how to construct these megalithic sites remains a mystery. But ancient astronaut theorists contend that megaton stone monuments were erected by human laborers, aided with alien technology.
And what do the ancient texts say about ancient Sumeria? That none of this could have been possible without the help of the gods, or in their case, the Anunnaki, which means those who from the heavens came. Many cultures had a time when they interacted with their living gods. So who were those gods? In my mind, they were misrepresented advanced extraterrestrials, and they brought forth the technology to build the monuments we see, such as Giza, or all across Bolivia, Peru, and South America.
Sitchin's interpretations of the Sumerian tablets further claim the ancient Anunnaki astronauts carried out breeding experiments to improve the species of laborers. But to keep the human population at bay and correct genetic mistakes, the aliens orchestrated so-called natural catastrophes.
And the Anunnaki saw the Neanderthal man naturally evolving here on Earth and just decided to put their genetic marker on it. Meaning they took 80% of their genes
and 20% of the hominoid that was here, and created us in their image and after their likeness. And this was essentially when modern humanity was born and starts to show up in the fossil record. It wasn't until 75,000 years ago that you have this super volcano that goes off in Lake Toba. In the aftermath of that great cataclysm, it appears that we went through further genetic modifications. Very, very powerful ETs came in and upgraded our DNA.
They probably figured, there's something wrong with this species. So they probably create these disasters, like the flood. And then, of course, there's always that biblical perspective. And people believe God did it. Well, God could have been the extraterrestrials, could have created that somehow. It's very possible, very likely, that in order to eradicate a species that they may have genetically altered themselves and screwed up with, that they needed to get rid of them and start all over again.
The ultimate proof for the ancient astronaut theory will not be in a megalithic site. It won't be finding a crashed spaceship, but it will be found deep within our genes. And that is exactly what the ancient texts are saying, that we were created in the image of the gods. Though more than 20,000 genes have been identified in the human genome, scientists worldwide have only begun to understand the origins of man. As geneticists continue to study our DNA, might they find traces of an alien species in our genes? And if Homo sapiens were genetically engineered by aliens, might they have continued to shape our existence? Elbert County, Georgia. 4 18-foot-tall granite stones form a mysterious monument some call the American Stonehenge. Engraved in the giant stones, in 12 languages, are 10 guides, or commandments, suggesting how to rebuild civilization after the apocalypse. Known as the Georgia Guidestones, the monument was built in 1979 by an unknown man going by the pseudonym R.C. Christian.
Some people have a theory that whoever put those guide stones up was either a Freemason or that the name R.C. Christian was really a way to parrot the fictional founder of Rosicrucianism centuries earlier. When you trace them back to the ancient gods who wore the same symbolic aprons, they were the ancient aliens that we now talk about.
Was the monument secretly built by followers of Rosicrucianism, an ancient society of mystics and philosophers who were inspired by the religions of the Far East? If so, might the stones contain coded messages intended to prepare us for the imminent apocalypse? Perhaps, but to some ancient astronaut theorists, warnings of an impending apocalypse are meant to caution human beings against the real prospect of an alien invasion, or worse. Perhaps the examination, vivisection, and eventual annihilation of all human life on our planet. Since the late 19th century, modern reports of aliens abducting and probing humans have numbered in the tens of thousands. Researcher David M. Jacobs has spent more than 40 years studying so-called abductees and their alien encounters through the use of hypnosis.
A preponderance of evidence of person after person saying the same thing to me, things that I could never have imagined being thought up. Then I began to realize, oh my God, this is actually happening, and I was dumbstruck by the fact that this was convincing evidence to me.
What Dr. Jacobs has reported is that what the aliens seem to have been doing for these last 40 years, perhaps longer, is that when they abduct people, it's not just an experiment. They are actually engaged in a very intense, very involved program of genetic breeding, where they are breeding hybrids. The abductees that he's been talking to, according to him, have gotten to the point of this massive program of creating hybrids, where now the hybrids look like us quite a bit, but behaviorally, psychologically, they are still alien.
Jacobs claims alien-human hybrids can communicate telepathically and dictate human thoughts neurologically.
These beings can put ideas, images in people's minds quite easily. Therefore, what people describe is that they can be controlled on a number of different levels by the minds of these other beings.
Since 2003, abductees have supposedly been reporting to Jacobs that the hybrids were being integrated into society, unnoticed by humans.
To me, this is possible evidence of the plan to do another thing, to kind of make room for this new jump from modern Homo sapiens to whatever we're going to call this new Homo sapiens. That is the potential future apocalypse involving the alien presence. And that's where I see some danger signs.
Some people think that these beings are benevolent, that they are here to help us, to stop war, cure cancer, that they are here for reasons that have everything to do with us and very little to do with them. I don't see benevolence here. I don't see malevolence. But I see the furthering of an alien agenda of which we do not know the future.
Some people have theorized that the creation of an alien hybrid race might be a way of accomplishing a better age on Earth. And there are some abductees who even bring back predictions that there will be a time called the change, when there will be aliens and humans living together on Earth as if it were, a return of the age of paradise. There are others who think that they are coming to create a better Earth. Some think they're coming to take over the Earth.
We really don't know the alien agenda. We do know that they have been telling abductees for a long time that soon everybody will be happy, soon everyone will know their place, soon we will all be together.
This has been going on for thousands of years with the creation of Homo sapiens. I mean, from the very get-go. So to suggest that now is the time where, a new hybrid extraterrestrial Homo sapiens will emerge in this new age of consciousness, no, it won't. We already are hybrids. We already are part extraterrestrial and part human. Human and alien hybrids? Extraterrestrial engineering designed to weed out excessive population growth? Or perhaps to exterminate inferior genetic strains? Might geological catastrophes and meteorological calamities be the work of unseen, perhaps alien hands? For skeptics, the answer is a resounding no. But with the end of the Mayan calendar looming in 2012, could all of our questions about the alien agenda finally be answered? Perhaps only those of us who survive on that date will ever learn the truth.
aliens. There you go. This is your first time to pee. Yeah. During my shift. Okay, so it's right there. You got it? I hope you feel a lot. pee more like that because that's the first time. Is that ancient whatever it was still on? Yes, you can continue if you want. I wouldn't mind. You want to watch it again? Yeah, sure. Ancient aliens, that's fine. You like it, eh? Let's see if we can find some more episode. Oh, what's that? What is this?
Unearthly inspirations, compelling ordinary people to perform extraordinary acts.
They thought it best to use members of the human population to communicate their message.
Heavenly visitations, inspiring everything from war to peace.
They could have imparted that information to Joan of Arc to give her the confidence that ultimately led her military campaign to victory.
And close encounters that leave behind mysterious clues to our past and our future.
I thought it's not going to come out to anything. And then something that appeared to be a real message regarding aliens emerged.
Millions of people around the world believe we have been visited in the past by extraterrestrial beings. What if it were true? Did ancient aliens really shape our history? And if so, have they been helped by individuals among us, chosen to communicate important messages? Rendlesham Forest, Suffolk County, England, 80 miles northeast of London. During the Cold War, more than 12,000 American officers and enlisted men were stationed at 2 Air Force bases on the forest's northern and southern edges: RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge. Shortly after midnight, on December 26, 1980, military radar detected an unidentified flying object, and there were civilian reports of strange flickering lights in the sky. Within minutes, military policemen, including Staff Sergeant James Peniston and Airman First Class John Burroughs, were sent into the woods to investigate. What they encountered was something the experienced servicemen had never seen before.
With this thing light, I started seeing a silhouette of a triangular craft. It was completely black in color, except for these occasional bits of blue and orange light and yellow light running through it. There was blue lights, there was like an orange sphere above it, there was a white light that would come out underneath it, and then there was like a misty orange haze.
In his report, Sergeant Peniston described the strange craft's dimensions as roughly 6.5 feet tall with 9-foot sides. He also noted unusual markings, raised symbols, similar to Egyptian hieroglyphs.
I was expecting to find, USAF, something like that. And what I find is that the glyphs, the pictorial glyph, make no sense at all. Then I was running my hand over the side of the craft.
Upon touching the craft, the 26-year-old serviceman claimed he received a strange and powerful vision.
It's one of the zeros, one of the ones. It just makes no sense. Take my hands off it, just stop. And then there was a bright flash of light. And then at that point, whatever it was appeared to go up in the air and take off and go back towards the coast. And we didn't have any more contact.
Oh my God. There's a big raccoon.
Peniston and Burroughs were ordered by the deputy base commander to treat the alleged sighting as if it had never happened. Still, after 3 decades, James Peniston remains haunted by his strange vision. So much so that he felt compelled to keep a written record of it. A record he kept locked away for nearly 30 years.
It's like someone was holding a picture up, okay, of this zeros, ones. I could see it in my mind's eye, okay? So I recorded those one after another. What do they mean? I don't know.
Could the strange numbers from James Peniston's vision be some type of extraterrestrial code? If so, Peniston would not be the first to claim to have received messages from otherworldly visitors. In fact, history is filled with accounts of people compelled into action by contact with what they claim to be an extraterrestrial, divine, or supernatural being. Abraham, Muhammad, and St. Paul are described as having been inspired by visits from God. Moses, Confucius, and the legendary Cambodian figure Priapishnokhar are said to have met strange visitors who passed along moral codes and philosophies.
God chose them because of their integrity, because of their faith. Men that were leaders that God had chosen to put in a certain position, people respected those leaders, and people knew that they were people of God.
According to the ancient astronaut hypothesis, visions are not divine at all. They were, in fact, visits by extraterrestrials where our ancestors thought it was a vision, but it never was. The person didn't quite comprehend that he or she was visited by flesh and blood extraterrestrials.
Perhaps the best known example of a man receiving specific instructions from an extraterrestrial source can be found in the story of Moses. According to the biblical book of Exodus, Moses first encountered God in the form of a burning bush. It was here that he was given his mission to deliver the Hebrew people out of slavery in Egypt and into the Promised Land. Later, at Mount Sinai, After he had safely brought the Jews into the desert, he was handed the Ten Commandments as laws given to man directly by God.
Eventually, these moral codes were the foundation of a whole worldwide religion.
But to ancient astronaut theorists, the story of Moses may be interpreted as not only divine, but also an alien encounter.
According to the Old Testament, Moses went up on Mount Sinai to meet with quote-unquote God. And I quote, "And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stones. And it was like the very heavens in its radiating clarity." And my question is, does something like this exist, or was it some sort of a misunderstood metallic ram? But it gets even better. Moses actually describes Earth seen from outer space. The quote is, "Thereupon I saw the whole round of the earth, at once the depth of the earth and the vast altitudes of the heavens." I mean, here he describes Earth as being round. At the time, that should have not been known, according to mainstream scientists.
Is it possible that Moses was inspired by a force, not only from the heavens, but from another world? If so, is it possible that other divine inspirations have also had otherworldly origins?
Puccini said that his great opera, Madama Butterfly, was from God, that he wrote it down, but it came directly from a divine source. William Blake, whose entire opus, his writing and the painting, was based on repeated angelic visitations. Brahms said that his music came from something beyond himself. He was the one who wrote it down, but he had to give credit to something beyond himself.
Could great works of art, music, literature, and religion really have been gifts to humanity from other worlds? If so, then why weren't these gifts given directly from aliens to man, instead of being communicated through human intermediaries? Perhaps an answer, like many alien messages, can be found in one of the oldest and holiest places on Earth.
Kenan, I think that was Kenan.
As ancient astronaut theorists believe, extraterrestrial beings have been contacting us throughout the centuries. Then what are they trying to tell us?
It appears again and again that here on Earth we're dealing with something that could be called the Hidden Directorate, a directing force of intelligent beings who may even be our progenitors and have been working with humanity ever since we began evolving on this planet, and will intervene at key points to try to nudge our development in a certain direction.
Why were some of our ancestors told to construct a building or to build an ark? Personally, I think to ensure mankind's survival. There are stories of malevolent gods, of malevolent extraterrestrials, but by and large, the stories that we have from ancient times, the gods were actually very benevolent. And these extraterrestrials have helped us throughout the millennia to survive to this day.
One of the oldest and most widespread stories of divine or unearthly intervention in human events can be found in the many great flood myths.
There are flood myths all over the world, not just in the Bible. You can find them all throughout South America. You can find them in Native American traditions. You can find them in the Celtic traditions. The legend of the Ragnarok, the deluge. It's in Asia. Native Africans have flood myths. So the story of Noah is not an isolated event that only happens in the Bible. It's part of a bigger story.
The oldest documented flood myth is the story of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The ancient Sumerian tale was discovered on a series of clay tablets dating back thousands of years.
Utnapishtim has a story which is almost identical to the story of Noah. There's only a few slight differences. In the Utnapishtim story, the beings that spoke to him and warned him about this spoke through the walls of his house. And his house then became the craft that was used to evacuate.
Like Noah, Utnapishtim collected every type of animal in anticipation of the flood. But could it have really been possible to collect every type of animal and fit them all in a single craft? Or might the ark have been a metaphor for another, much more advanced and extraterrestrial form of transportation device?
The ark in the Sumerian story is shaped like a cube. We now have physicists that are developing hyperdimensional physics models in which they're actually plotting out the mathematics of how these higher dimensions are constructed and what they look like. It's called a tesseract. A tesseract is a cube within a cube. So it's possible that the cube that was referred to in the original Epic of Gilgamesh could be describing a Stargate portal that used this type of hyperdimensional geometry as a way to ensure that Utnapishtim and all the animals and the people that he saved wouldn't be here on Earth at all. And that's how they were able to survive the deluge.
Around the world, many churches, temples, and other holy structures are said to have been divinely inspired by angels, gods, and even beings from other worlds. But why? To honor and praise a supreme being? Or might there be another purpose? Angkor Wat, Cambodia. In the 16th century, one of the first Westerners to see this elaborate temple, Portuguese monk Antonio de Magdalena, described it as an extraordinary construction, as like no other building in the world. With each side measuring nearly a mile long, Angkor Wat remains the planet's largest religious structure. Although mainstream archaeologists believe Angkor Wat was built in the 12th century by King Suryavarman II as a state temple and capital city, Cambodian legends maintain it was built as far back as 600 BC by Priya Pishnokar, the offspring of a commoner father and a mother who came from the heavens. When grown, Priya was said to be abducted up into a flying palace by a group of otherworldly beings, led by the god Indra.
The message Priya received was to be a leader for his people and a teacher. He was taught all these different things when he was up at Indra's heaven, this flying palace up in the sky. When he came back to Earth after this long education, Priya was basically the chosen one to teach his people in the ways of the world and the universe.
According to the myths, Priya was also commissioned to build Angkor Wat, not just as a sanctuary of peace and healing, but as a landing zone for the sky beings who taught him, referred to as the glowing ones.
The way it is described, it says that no real tools were actually used, but just magical water. He was able to pour this magical water onto stone, and after a while, it would harden into place. Magical water. Come on! There is no such thing as magical water. So my question is, what type of technology was used Korea was able to build this magnificent city with ease. That's what the ancient texts are saying. Angkor Wat was more than likely built by the hands of human beings, but the architectural plan of sophistication to lay out that type of complex could not have been engineered by human beings alone at that time.
6,000 miles northwest of Angkor Wat, a 15th century French girl also reportedly received a divine inspiration, not to build, but to lead men in war. Orléans, France. In 1429, the city was besieged by the English during the 100 Years' War. The survival of the French military and government appeared doomed. Then, 17-year-old Joan of Arc traveled to Chateau Chinon, where she persuaded the local leaders that the Saints Michael, Catherine, and Margaret had visited her and told her that her presence in Orléans would inspire the French army to break the siege.
Joan of Arc's story is a fabulous tale of a vision really affecting history in a practical and concrete way. France was in bad trouble. This sensitive souled, very young girl has the vision of saints that come to her and tell her to lead an army and free a city. She does so. She also has some prophecy from these visitations that she's able to end a siege of a major city and make major contributions to history, all because these saints came to her in a vision.
While Joan served primarily as a military figurehead, she also designed new artillery tactics and repeatedly outsmarted the more experienced English commanders. But did her mysterious visions actually come from heaven? Or might the French teenager have received, as ancient astronaut theorists suggest, a type of advanced extraterrestrial knowledge?
If this is in fact what was happening, then it would lead one to conclude that the Hidden Directorate decided that the way the world would turn out if this battle had not been won in favor of the French would have been an extremely negative outcome for humanity. So, Joan of Arc was then contacted by a luminous extraterrestrial being that could have imparted that information to Joan of Arc to give her the confidence that ultimately led her military campaign to victory.
If extraterrestrial beings have inspired and affected human events, then is it really, as some suggest, to help improve humanity? Or could there be another, perhaps darker and more sinister agenda? Hisarlik, northwestern Turkey. More than 3,000 years ago, this was the walled city of Troy. According to Greek mythology, Troy was the site of a horrific war between the Trojans and the Achaeans that was manipulated by the gods.
Thousands upon thousands of people died, and the city of Troy is totally destroyed. It's hard to imagine when you read stories like this of gods asking people to go to war, do things they wouldn't want to do. It's hard to imagine that they want what's best for us.
In my opinion, extraterrestrials are just like humans. So of course extraterrestrials also would take sides. They would take sides with certain people and make enemies with other people.
But when bad things happen to good people, does it suggest that alien visitors are capable of having evil intent? Or does it simply suggest the presence of bad aliens, as well as good ones?
You look back to these stories, some of which have to do with actual historical events that led to blood, guts, destruction, and you say to yourselves, Maybe they don't want what's best for us. Maybe their values and concerns have absolutely nothing to do with ours.
Just like there are good people and bad people here on Earth, there's good and bad extraterrestrials out there. Not everything is hunky-dory out there. Good and evil permeates the entire universe. Yin and yang. There's a balance.
I'm not sure it's always that cut and dry. In the book of Exodus, some translations say an angel killed all the firstborn Egyptians. Some say that the Lord, and I put that in quotations, slaughtered the firstborn Egyptian sons. Hard to reconcile that, at least in my perspective, that a benevolent, loving God would have angels to slaughter innocents, to slaughter kids.
Half a world away from the Mediterranean, across the Atlantic, another massacre of innocents was said to have been directed by the gods. Tenochtitlan, Mexico. 500 years ago, this was the capital of the Aztec Empire. During the 15th century AD, the high priest Tlacaelel claims to have received a command from the gods in the form of a dream. His people were to perform human sacrifices.
The Aztecs are like so many other civilizations on this planet. For them, dreams were the primary means of communication with the other world. So, interpreting the dreams was the central thing which the high priests had to do. Now the question is, why did he do this? Is this just something Tlacaelel invented, or is it really the fact that he had a dream whereby his new and brutal regime somehow had to be imposed upon his people?
But if, as ancient astronaut theorists maintain, there are malevolent gods or evil extraterrestrials, does that suggest we have something to fear? Or might the evil be found not in the message, but with the messenger?
The possibility that some messages that were sent by extraterrestrials have been received and misinterpreted is fairly large, because our ancestors thought that these messages were sent by godlike beings, by divine creatures, which they never were.
Now there's quite a bit of evidence, even contemporary, of people committing murders or about to commit murders who believe that either God spoke to them or something else. And we actually find in many cases that this is not the case, that this is delusion.
In the Bible's book of Genesis, God instructs Abraham to kill his only son, Isaac. But was this command really given by God? Or might Abraham have received multiple messages from more than one being?
Might it actually be an origin, a sort of conversation whereby Abraham and Isaac are not subjected to one deity, but to more than one deity, giving them contradictory messages whereby one being might be saying, kill your son, and the other being might be saying, don't kill your son? Are we in fact maybe confronted with two warring civilizations or two warring tribes?
And I really do think that the gods, the extraterrestrials, knew 100% what they were doing. Just like when we arrive on a different planet and we achieve instant godlike status, we'll use that to our advantage. We're not going to say to them, oh, no, 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 we're like you. We'll say, yes, you obey us or else. And that is exactly what happened here on Earth 10,000 years ago.
For ancient astronaut theorists, one fact is certain. After contact is established, the fate of the human messenger is not always a pleasant one. After her capture by the English army, Joan of Arc burned at the stake as a heretic. St. Paul, who converted to Christianity after a divine apparition, was later executed by the Romans. And Moses led his people through the desert for 40 years, but could not enter the promised land himself.
Anytime God chose a particular person to do a particular job, you're always going to have opposition. Moses had opposition, with Pharaoh. And Paul, of course, was stoned. Those outside incidents, those forces that came against him, that was the burden, so to speak.
Some people who might have received conceivable messages by extraterrestrials are at first fearful that they might have to upend their lives, or even worse, be called crazy.
But could the fear of ridicule or death on the part of human messengers explain why there are not more alien messages that get transmitted? Or might many of those who have experienced extraterrestrial contacts have closed their eyes or shut their ears simply because the truth may be too incredible to bear? Billions of people around the world consider holy books like the Bible and the Quran to be the Word of God. Hundreds of millions of Hindus view the Mahabharata as a guide to spiritual enlightenment, handed down by the god Lord Krishna himself. Each of these holy books contains religious principles in the form of philosophies, parables, and moral codes.
Messages from beyond our ordinary knowledge seem to come in a variety of forms: a visitation, a dream, sometimes an object, a tablet, a golden plate, a book. And so it helps. A book is an ordinary object we are familiar with, and yet if it's seen as divinely inspired, we can take it as more than an ordinary book.
The great majority of mankind today regards the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran as the Word of God. But is it possible that these books were nothing else but guiding books of how we should conduct our lives, and that these moral codes were in fact given to us by extraterrestrials whom our ancestors thought were gods?
I don't think the Mahabharata is a work of fiction. It's an actual history. And the history given in the Mahabharata includes not only actions of human beings on Earth, it also includes actions of extraterrestrials on other planets and on this Earth in interaction with human beings here.
Cultures all over the world believe deities and other non-human entities frequently communicated through intermediaries known as prophets. In the Quran, it's written that God has sent over 100,000 prophets throughout history. Many Native American cultures believed God spoke to them through shamans, much like the oracles of ancient Greece.
An oracle is a person, but a person in some divine state, an altered state of some kind, who is able to hear the voices of the gods and then translate it into accessible human language.
But could the same phenomena apply to Judeo-Christian religious texts? Might biblical stories of angels and miracles actually be misinterpretations of ancient alien contact or inspiration?
The visitations or apparitions come to give some gift, to open the mind, to lead to a new perception, to lead to a new possibility, either a new artistic take on something or a new plan for humanity. Often we're trapped in some kind of thinking that needs to break beyond its known limits, but we're caught. We are unable to see, to get a transcendent perspective, and that is what the visitation makes possible.
If that is true, there might be additional evidence of alien contact by examining breakthroughs in the fields of astronomy, archaeology, and physics. Or perhaps what is arguably the most universal of all languages, mathematics. Cambridge University, England, February 1913. Mathematics professor Godfrey H. Hardy receives a letter containing complex mathematical theorems and formulas from 26-year-old Srinivasa Ramanujan of India. The distinguished scholar is stunned by what he reads.
Hardy looks at these theorems and says, "My God, we've never seen anything like this. This is mathematics of the highest order. It's so convoluted and complex that nobody could have come up with this by their imagination. There has to be something here."
An acknowledged genius and mathematical prodigy since childhood, Ramanujan was devoutly religious and often claimed his breakthroughs were communicated to him in his dreams by the Hindu goddess Namagiri. In the decades since, his theorems have proved to be invaluable to those working in cutting-edge fields like string theory,